She's a former game producer, planning manager, in charge of managing the bidding process of Virtus Studios across Europe and North America. She has worked on two AAA titles and led over 100 project bids, aligning production strategy with client needs from pitch to kickoff. Now part of Virtus's business development team, she supports studios in the EU and MED regions, leveraging her operational expertise to build lasting partnerships. Can we, with a warm round of applause, welcome on stage Soukayna. Please welcome Soukayna on stage, Business Development Manager for Virtus. Yes, she said that. I should want to say
I did say it a lot. I think
all right.
when everybody knows my name. Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank you for answering me back, because you're tired, because I am. You've listened to a lot of talks. Some of it was informative, but I'm sure that your brain is overloaded right now. And I'm coming here to speak at you again, so bear with me while we go through this topic. And I think it's an important topic, and I hope you learn a lot from it. Or, no. So, I'm here to talk about my experience as a professional in the co-development sphere. And you probably don't know what co-development is or who I am. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself very quickly. We can move on to the next slide. So, as I said, I myself have been a producer and led production on two AAA games, one of them which is out now, and another one which is coming out soon. I don't know if you've ever played RuneScape, but the newest Dragon's Wild, I was on it. I have, since then, I've also been in charge of all of the bidding for Virtuous, over 100 projects, or 100 different games, where I pitched either a part of the strategy or oversaw or chose the team that's going to be working on it. And as well, like Teddy and Chris, to continue the joke, I really like jollof rice since yesterday. It did hurt my stomach, but I survived. But it's very, very good. So, what is Virtuous, you ask me? We're one of the world's largest game development companies. We have studios across Asia, Europe, and North America. We are specializing, as I said, in co-development, and we've worked on most of the games that you've heard about. Our latest release that's been done originally by us was Oblivion Remastered. Maybe you've played it recently, and I hope you can enjoy it. But we've worked on Call of Duty franchise, Horizon Zero Dawn, on Final Fantasy, all kinds of games. Honestly, like 2K, V2K, Topspin. The things are endless. If you move on to the next slide, I think you'll see why. So we have 25 studios across the world, around 4,200 people, and we've worked on over 900 games since Virtuous started, which was around 20 years ago, in 2014. So, as I said, we've seen a lot of production, we've seen a lot of ecosystems, and I have personally seen quite a bit of the challenges that happen throughout different games. I don't know who's showing to me on WhatsApp, but it's very interesting. So why Nigeria? Why now? I think this is a question I'm asking myself and asking you. I've heard a lot of things about why Nigeria is the next place for video games. You have youthful people, you're tech savvy, and I've seen it. You speak very good English, which is a very big plus when you're working with studios abroad. You have a cultural film, music, you have stories, you're rich in stories. Just coming into here, I hear a lot of names of tribes, names, etc. I see the willingness, and as an African myself, I'm Moroccan, raised in Morocco, born in Morocco. I did not know that there was a future for me in video games. I've never seen people like me, I've never heard of people like me, until one day I was playing a game which is called Prince of Persia. I don't know if you know it. And then I saw Ubisoft Casablanca, and I'm from Casablanca. And I was so inspired. The first time, I'm like, we have a game studio here in Morocco? Like, how did this happen? There's people like me. It took a few years for me to even think of myself as a gamer, because all the games that I played were games that were stolen. I didn't buy because there was no distribution. obviously, and I think it's the same here now. We have Steve, but going to black markets with the guy with the CDs and the plastic, and you pick the CD, and maybe you get a console because you have a relative that went to Europe or somewhere and he bought a console for you, and you've been begging for results. So I didn't play Nintendo games because it was really hard to get, like Super NES. My first console was PlayStation 1, and my first game was Silent Hill. I don't know if you played Silent Hill, but that's not a very kid friendly. I was 6. I needed therapy. But as I said, this is something that's dear to my heart that I think is important. And whatever bit of knowledge I have about the industry and working in it, I have been and it wasn't an accident that I ended up where I am, to be honest. It's like very practical. I was thinking about how can I understand this industry more? How can I get the max of knowledge? And this is why I ended up with the development side of it. So the growth challenge, as I said, there's a tech savvy youth, there's creative power. You guys are in a strategic time zone, and I don't think you realize how important that is, that you are 1 hour away from Europe. That makes it so much easier for collaboration compared to Asia and a lot of other countries. A lot of countries that have that limitation in terms of time zone. And as I said, you're used to hustling. You're hustling people, and that helps. But it also can present a challenge because you are hustling people. It's really hard, us in Africa, it's really hard to have legitimacy in the global sphere when it comes to video game production, at least in the in the major leagues. We don't have global exposure, we don't have reliable pipelines, the revenues are, sometimes they come, sometimes they don't come. If we make games internally for our markets, don't have people who play them from our markets, or they don't have the means to buy them, and we don't have enough financing, publishers, people with capital coming and wanting to invest here. Because to invest in Africa, you really need to want to suffer a bit as a financier. Because you're building everything from scratch, and you don't know if you're gonna get a return. So you really need to do it. You're not gonna do it for a business reason necessarily. Maybe if you have a lot of money and you're 10 years from now, I'm gonna get a return on my investment. But if you do it now, it's because you care. Honestly. Which is why it's a bit hard to make a case for why other companies should come here and build in Africa. So we all have a collective responsibility on actually improving that visibility and making us viable, having a seat on the table and being, legitimate in the seat that we're taking, but that we are expert as much as them talking about things that we do. So, and as I said, that comes from large-scale product experience. It doesn't have to be large scale, but it does help because a lot of the games that actually make the most of money are large scale. So the top 90% of players or playing time is captured by the top 20 of games, unfortunately. So even though you have thousands of games coming every day, every week, only 10 of them every year capture 90% of the revenue worldwide. That means that yes, you can have a private ecosystem with small game and indie games, but you need that big title. You need that 1 or 2 titles that are going to be putting you at the front scene as an African continent. That we are, part of that ecosystem to make those billions and those millions of games. So, what is co-development? As I said before, it's a collaborative process of making games together with other studios. It's structured. It's long term. It's not like outsourcing. We don't just execute. As I said, working together to a shared goal. It can involve art, design, engineering, QA. I don't know if you know what QA is. Does anybody know? Quality assurance. People who test the game and play it to make sure that it runs, right? Because a game is a technology, so even as an art, you need to make sure that it's not broken and that everything works well. So it's not just part of it, it's also a big partnership. So we can move to the next slide if you want. Exciting. So, what I'm trying to expose you to is how that Nigeria built its ecosystem. I do not have that answer. Nobody does. And it's gonna come through you doing and trying things. But what I want to expose you to is other models that have worked for other countries. And as well, Nigeria has its own specificities. Africa all over has its own specificities. It's part of Africa. That's something I also want to answer from my own country, Morocco, and just the willingness there. But I just want to expose you about how it happens in other countries because even like game veterans, people professionals in the industry, don't necessarily know the history of how their ecosystem was built in their countries. So the first example I have is, if you can move on to the next slide, is Vietnam. And there was a huge flag there, and it's not showing there, but you can imagine it. So Vietnam is actually now one of the epicenters of what we talk about art for development in video games. A lot of the art you see in video games actually come from Vietnam. And it started with 2D art and animation. They used to do animate like art for animation, for anime, for example, for Japan. They used to do art for Disney, other clients there, and that's from there they started branching out to gaming, building studios that had their own talent houses. So they had schools within the studios to be able to bring that talent into specific, as I said, disciplines. And it started with 2D art, and then it moved to 3D art, and then through government investments and French and Asian partnerships, as well as some long-term collaboration in Europe. So now we have big studios like Sparks, like Glass Egg, like Jumbox and VNG. Actually, Sparks and Glass Eggs were purchased by Virtuos at different decades. So one was purchased in 2005 or 6 or something like that. No, not 6, like 2015 or 16, and the other one was purchased around 2020. And they are like 1,000 people strong kind of studios. And so right now the ecosystem of video games has grown from 0 in like the 2000s to 500 million in 2024, a yearly gross revenue. So it's not the most robust ecosystem, but it is a model of growth that we see from emerging markets. And the next one is, if you can move to the next one, is Colombia, which is a smaller, like you probably not haven't heard about it, but it's actually one of the growest right now ecosystems in terms of games. I don't know what happened, but something happened. Then we go to Colombia. And what I was saying, that it started with smaller art and QA tasks, art and QA being the easiest ones to start with, usually for different countries, because the barriers are very low. But to be honest, I would not necessarily recommend it for every place. But that's why you use, and then they expanded into gameplay, codem, and have their own IPs. And the success factor was, as I said, English upskilling, being very close to North America in terms of time zone, and also events and tax incentives. You will see throughout all of these examples that tax incentives help a lot. So governments being involved in actually creating the system was what the major accelerator of it. And since then grew like Turbovision, Brains, Effecto Studios, and now the market is around 50 million, so it's not that big, but it is very, very fast growing. Next slide. And Romania. I use Romania as an example of Eastern Europe, but you can see this model actually reproduced in a lot of Eastern European countries. And to be fair, they're a very special model because they are technically in Europe. So that means a robust, education system that's very close to other studios or other partners. You must know that actually most of the ecosystem of video games exists in maybe 4 or 3 countries. That's like the machines. They're the one driving most of the revenue when it comes to video games. So you have your Japan, you have some European countries. I put them in one cluster because they are, you have Sweden, France, and a bit of Germany and UK. That's the third cluster, and this third cluster is USA. Those are the big guys. Those are the big guns. The rest are like satellite around those big guns. That big or small, depending on the years and the decades, but that's mainly it. It's not like a million of countries in there, but it's very centralized. So that's why I'm telling you, like being in proximity to those centrals kind of drives you in to be able to get a part of that share of the pie. And as I said, Romania actually started with QA and porting, and then scaled into engineering and life services because of the engineering expertise, as I said, in Eastern Europe, and I said it before. And the major partners, it was also driven mainly by the arrival of partners that wanted to invest in the country, namely Ubisoft and EA, so that they opened Ubisoft Romania and EA Romania, that spun out to be other studios that grew as well and made their own IPs. And now they're around 40 million in 2022 with 6,000 game creators in the country. And the next example I have for you is Poland. How big do you think Poland is in the game industry? Yes. Very big. Very big. Yeah. Well, CD Projekt is one of the top 5 most valued companies in the video game sphere. They're in the top 5, and they were here since 2010s and early 2000s. That's when it started. A couple of decades, and they become one of the major players. How did that start? It started from an ecosystem with few indie game developers that made some games that were profitable, but accelerated by other companies that had the background in co-development and localization. Do you know what localization is? Localization is basically translating games, for your market in general. So, for example, if you're in an Arabic country, you bring in your game, and it's not just about translating the text, but making sure that the things that need to be censored are censored, that need to be adapted are adapted. The UI can handle your language, for example, maybe the voices. So that's how they started for global RPG leadership, and then they had some EU funding and university pipelines that led them into building very, very strong internal studios. And that's how CD Projekt started, actually. I don't know if you know the story, but they used to sell CDs, like stolen CDs, and they used to do localization, and that's how they got their first funding to actually make their own IP. And now they're 4 billion strong, one of the epicenters of video game creation with more than 10,000 creators. And the next example I'm going to give you is an even more surprising example because we didn't think about it in the mindset of co-development. But the next one is, if you can do it please, it's Montreal, Canada. When you think about games, you can't forget about Montreal. A lot of the studios come from there, a lot of the Assassin's Creed that you enjoy come from there, a lot of the big games that you know about are made in Montreal. But Montreal ecosystem was only created in 1997. It was one of the earliest ecosystems, actually. One of the success factors is, again, aggressive tax incentives. Again, with the tax incentives, you will see it in every country. I think it's one of the foundational things that help an ecosystem be built because it brings in, other talents and other studios that want to invest in the place. It lowers the cost. Strong university and the bilingualism because, as I said, and also Ubisoft coming. It was actually the thing that triggered, Ubisoft. Ubisoft that came and triggered the creation of that industry. So that's what a lot of countries in Africa right now, you see a lot of governments trying to bring in that first big player. Because they know if they bring in that first big player, then it's gonna spin into talent. People are gonna work for them, they're gonna quit, they're gonna open their own studio, they're gonna bring in their own talent, and that's how it grows. It puts the seeds on the ground for things to grow much more easily. So now you have behavioral, you have iOS, and it's around 1 billion. Surprisingly enough, it's not as big as the Polish. And the Polish ecosystem is actually slightly bigger, and it's more recent. So as I said, the sky is the limit. We're not in Europe, unfortunately, so there's a lot of things that we have as a barrier of entry, as I said. The governmental issues, like tax incentives play a big role. We have the professionalization aspect. As I said, you need to have the pipelines, have the codes, have the tools, come in with legitimacy, so how to be the legitimacy. Part of it is unfortunately racism, to be honest. Part of it is real, because as I said, we are used to bootlegging our way into industries and we have the hustling culture and we need to hustle and do things, etc. That we forget that actually that not necessarily playing against us, it's very important to get your foot in the door. But as I said, you need to project a professionalism a polish that feels like, oh, you're a partner worth listening to and bringing you in, and you're part of that conversation. So next slide, please, if you can. So, few lessons to learn from what I'm telling you. Start small, structure. As I said, a lot of these examples, if not all of them, have started with one thing. That one thing that they couldn't. And then built from there. It could be, you have examples of Turkey that didn't start with development, for example, but started with mobile. They did mobile for other publishers, they built around that, built some expertise. Now they're a major player. As I said, you have examples like the Philippines and Vietnam that built around an art expertise. Which, to be fair, is the lowest barrier of entry, but it's also the most difficult to compete in. But fortunately, you guys have a thing that other countries don't have, which is the cost structure. You are less costly by a big margin than a lot of the other countries, so you have something to compete with here. If you're at the same quality, that's it. That's the big asterisk, is you have to be at the same quality with a lower price, then you'll be the pick. But can you live on it? I think we'll see that later. Lesson 2 is build production discipline. So talent alone is not enough. It needs to be galvanized. It's like a diamond, it needs to be polished. And polish comes through structure, through tools and convention. You can't be working in the industry right now without knowing what Unreal is, or how to work on Unreal, for example, or how to do something specific. What is Lumen? What is Nanite? What is ray tracing? All those kind of tools that within engines, etc. Those terms, those technologies. If you don't know about them, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And good structure means repeat customer. If somebody works with you, even if they do props, as like you do like the tiny tag on a shirt, and you deliver on time, you deliver quality, you're a good partner to work with, then they're gonna trust you more. Then you're gonna make the whole outfit. Then you're gonna make the character, and then you're gonna make the full scene. But as I said, reliability is better even with quality. So reliable quality then cost is usually the priority for studios generally if they want to look for a partner. Next slide. Lesson 3, as I said, communicate across continents. I'm gonna iterate again, but I need you. How lucky it is that you're 1 hour away from here in terms of time zones. A lot of teams want to work with people that feel close to them and that they can communicate with. So if they can communicate with you more, that's a huge advantage. And as I said, the language is an advantage. You are very, very lucky people to, you're born speaking in English, a lot of you speak English. That eases a lot than other countries, for example, like even China, one of the biggest hurdles for them, which is like a big game industry. But one of the things that hinders partnership or collaboration is that not everybody speaks English at that level, but you guys do. So harness that for your advantage. And as I said, having shared tools, shared processes. Next lesson. And building trust to embedded ownership. Nobody, as I said, this is not about outsourcing, and I don't think you need to think about co-development as outsourcing because that makes it unsustainable. You don't want to be the guy that just makes the tags on the shirt and doing the tags on the shirt exactly as somebody says. What people want is a partner that thinks with them, that thinks with their own challenges, that solves problems together, that comes in with a vision. So adopt, then you improve on your client processes. You don't have to stop there, they don't know everything. You have your own expertise, your own stories to tell, your own way of doing things that might actually even be better. So communicate them, be proud of them. Take accountability and ownership. But be proactive, spot blockers, make your portfolio, send it to the studio. Don't wait for them to come to you. And don't ask them just what they need, but what problem they're trying to solve, and then try to solve with them. Because studios, they want partners, they don't want just execution. Because if you're just somebody who executes, you're easy to replace. And that's not sustainable for your business. You don't want to be working on a project, hiring 5 people, 10 people, and then, 2 years or 1 year down the line, or even a couple of months, and say, actually, there's this other partner, and, they help us with this, and then, your survival depends on it. And as I said, speaking of the partner, unfortunately, The issue is that today development is not optional for most studios. Even in the UK, even in France, even in the what you would call big game ecosystems, a lot of the studios as to become the client. And becoming the client means that you can build resiliency within your ecosystem. I work for you, you work for me, because I'm making my IP, we work for the other studio, we work together, we create a new thing, and that's how a robust ecosystem is built. It's not by being on one side or the other. I think my goal is I'm not coming here to preach about, oh, Nigeria should become the next co-development hub in the region. That's not a sustainable model. But what I want to open you up to is that co-development exists. It's vital to survival of most studios everywhere. So you shouldn't try to build the wheel and reinvent the wheel as you are. Get the help you can from outside. Get that money flow, your cash flow to be able to finance your original game. Get that knowledge, that talent. You find that people, maybe you have Nigerian people in the industry already that they want to come back, and bring in their own knowledge. So I want you to think about the ways you can capture that wealth, whether it's money or otherwise, to make your next game. And to create also financial structures around your ecosystem, like publishers, funding, etc. By being around that graph, you will see how publishers make their decisions, who invests in whom. They will know you. They will see your name and credits. You gain a legitimacy. The next time they want to invest in the game, they will invest in yours because they know you have the track record to build it. So, like I said, not the supplier-only path. We want an ecosystem growth path. Because the supplier-only path, there's two countries, as I said, like Vietnam and Philippines, that have fallen into that trap, where they're now seen as suppliers and not necessarily as builders. So, it's good for their sustainability in terms of money, but it's not good for their sustainability in the long term in terms of game ecosystem. Because one day, the next country becomes cheaper and better in quality, and it's gonna become the new destination. And so if Nigeria tomorrow builds their own 3D studios for art, and they do doing characters because they upscale, then you're cheaper, all the studios are gonna come work with you. And that's good for the long term, but not good on the long term, because you don't want to become replaceable. You want to be, sustainable on yourself. But it's a good place to start. So reinvent tools, teams, have your own original IPs, start publishing, funding, and leading projects internally in your system, build local value to attract global talent, so that people want to come to Nigeria here to actually work on your games as well. So the next slide. So a mature ecosystem looks like service studios, independent studios working together, local publishers, funders, platforms working together, events, training, cross-studio collaboration. As I said, the goal is not to replace co-development or new IP creation, but is to have them create value for each other so that they both can sustain your ecosystem. And if you want to make games, you need money. It takes a long time. 3 years without a salary, nobody's willing to do that. And unfortunately, unlike films or books, where you get to create your art and push it soon or early enough that you can make some money out of it, it's not the case. And the bigger the game, the bigger the potential, and the bigger the years of struggle you will have to face in uncertainty. Not knowing when you're going to get your next paycheck, not knowing when you're going to pay the people around you. And what I'm trying to explain here is there are opportunities for you to actually be able to gain experience and in funding to be able to survive long enough for you to actually build your own games. So, thank you. I think that's my final slide. So do you have any questions?
Any questions? Okay, we have someone with a question.
These examples really help drive the points, right? So it's more of a curious question as regards government being a factor, right? Especially with funding and tax incentives. So I just want to ask, in your own experience, right? Has it been the government reaching out to the studios and saying, okay, there are tax incentives, or has it been the industry itself? I mean, the game industry now, probably the game studios reaching out to the government and requesting for these incentives, if we call it that?
the biggest expert in terms of how the tax is set. Tell you the little I know. Usually, it's a mix of both. If I think about the example of Canada, for example, the tax incentive started first. Then Ubisoft came. For example, Morocco is trying to do the same right now. They have the tax incentive, but no studio is coming yet. But in other countries, it's been through militancy of local studios doing the convincing, building a case for why the government should care about video games that prompt them into action. So as I said, I think there's a part to be done for both. I think, unfortunately, if the government doesn't do its part, then you don't have a choice. You have to be that voice that goes into them and tries to convince them about the potential of video games. And I think the potential is there. The argument is very easy to make. I think it's just a matter of like having the right person hear it. I don't think as Nigerian we'll have a lot of difficulties trying to find the arguments. It's about trying to find the people that are going to be willing to listen to those arguments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Good day, everyone. So I'll start from there. You know, Nigeria is not into gaming kind of games business. So it's something new, and we're trying to venture into it. I want to start from somewhere. Government is not helping anybody decide themselves. So the problem is simple. So when we that are trying to adopt this gaming culture in the sense that going into it, what are the factors to consider in sense of cost? So the government has several platforms for game, there's PC, there's console, there's mobile, you get so which is more affordable. Because you said something last time which I noted, you said what can Nigerians do that, or we Africans do that, so you go to Czech Republic, they are good in engines, Philippines are those who act, we are good in we don't share mutual interest in this country. Everybody has what they're interested in. Some people are interested in art. Some people have skill, they learn education, they have their handiwork, which they do. So you don't expect me to be channeled to one direction, to be into something. I think if we have something to portray, like you want to show something in the game, it would be like putting it in total, you understand, having a bit of everything, not just the kind of arcade game where we have fights and all that stuff. Maybe, you understand, having a game that is compound, to put a bit of everything, if it's music, that we give that to show light on songs that have been played in the past, the somebody that loves the music and he wants to test it, it's
all right. Are you done? Have you answered?
Let's just start my points now.
Is it a point or is it a question?
Let's see if you can understand. Try to have my point now. Do you understand? Just wait with patience, please. So, what I'm trying to say is that if you are trying to portray, we Nigerians here, portray something in gaming, what would be able to portray is a bit of everything in consequent and different interest. So the game has to have a compound, a compound interest.
I think I know what you're getting into, but I think my answer would be it depends on what you sell.
Sorry, please. So now we imbibing it as our culture, taking it as a business for us. To try it up because we are going to go into it, to start the very little, this capital is economy, government is not helping. So we try to go into it as little capital as we have to test people to bring something in for us. So I'm trying to say that now we have the know-how, we go and acquire the knowledge on how to do the development of the structure of the game, and we have good, good message, good kind of we have something to portray. You understand? Now, what costs like? What do we look out for? The game running on PC, running on console, running on mobile, which is more affordable. You understand? That's
Okay. I see your mic has gone off for reasons that are very, very alien to me. But I don't know if you got his question.
I think I I might need some help in, you summarizing the question because I have a hard time hearing everything. So it was
Okay, so let me give you 10 seconds to summarize the questions, like one, two. All right.
Now, we going into this game now,
yeah.
based on the cost, what are the guidelines? How will you guide us in how we will be able to achieve our aim without spending much? I know games are being run on several platforms like mobile, PC, and console, which is the easiest one to tackle in terms of cost.
Okay. I understand. Because what I'm telling, as I said, it depends on what you're selling. Here, what I'm trying to explain is that you don't necessarily have to sell games to consumers to have an ecosystem and build around it. What you can do is sell your expertise to other studios that are already building those games. But if you want to make your own games at smaller scale, there's a lot of, as I said, the easiest entry is mobile for sure, because it's the lowest cost. Especially in hyper casual games, usually the time is around 2 weeks. It's 1 or 2 people, and then you can iterate and push and try to see how many people play your game. And that's a model, and it's a choice, studio. But if you want to make games that for other platforms, and to be fair, it's a model that's very competitive. A lot of people that are in it because it's so easy. A lot of people do it, so there's a lot of competition, which means that the potential of it making money for you specifically becomes lower and lower the more people get into that market. Do you understand what I mean? So it's not sustainable, in my opinion, but that's a personal opinion for me, to have everybody go into the less costly part of the market. Exactly, you need balance. Otherwise, you have just too many people doing hyper-casual games, for example, because they're not costly and very easy to make, but nobody making money, because there's too many actors in the business. So you need to have, the whole spectrum if you want to be a mature ecosystem. So for Nigeria, my goal is look forward down the line. So here, the story I'm trying to tell is, don't necessarily sell to people, sell to company. Your expertise until you can sell to people in your game. Just for a way for you to diversify the way you make money out of video games. Does that make sense?
Afternoon, everyone. I just want to get some clarification. Yeah. So, based on your last point, that the ideal scenario for the Nigerian game development scene right now is that we should try to sell our expertise whenever we can.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, going by that, I believe that one way we can do that right now is through code development, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
There's another question apparently. I'm happy you guys are engaged with this topic.
All right. I came a bit late, but awesome presentation so far. My question closely ties into what you just said just now. You make points that we shouldn't just depend on maybe trying to sell our services, but also we should also try and build our own IP.
Yes.
To give a solid statement in the industry. In my own experience as a game developer, I started with the idea of wanting to build my own IP.
Yep.
But quite quickly, I realized I would need to be funded in some way to
Yep.
earn a living. And I began to sell my skills or my services to the clients. But I realized no time on my own personal project to build my own IP.
It's true.
Right balance.
And do you balance?
Yeah, how do big companies balance this?
The money talks. That's how big companies manage. Whichever makes it our company specializes. They chose their camp. They're like, we're not interested in doing original IP for now. It's not necessarily a forever, but we want to be very good at co-development. Some companies do the way around, where co-development is a survival strategy. As long as I make enough money to survive, then I'm use max amount of time I have to make my own IP. Yeah. But as I said, the point isn't necessarily I think it's a question for you necessarily to see how much money do you need to survive with your own IP. And also, it's also a matter of quality. Like one of my arguments about good development is not necessarily just the financial stability, but the learning that you get out of it. Because when you go through a, I don't know, like even a double A or an indie game studio creation process from start to finish, when you're gonna make your own game, you're gonna get better at it. You're gonna be better, you're gonna produce better quality, you're gonna have higher standards for yourself, and you're gonna be easier for you to match the market because you've seen the process happen from the beginning to the end. You've seen how it looks like to get players. You've seen how it looks like that production challenges you face. You've seen the pipelines, you've seen the tools, you've seen best practices. So it's easier for you to replicate that in your experience. So as I said, it's a personal question for you to ask to yourself to see, oh, do I have the knowledge that I think will be necessary for me to be competitive and not just be one of the million of indie studios that releases a game that nobody plays? And also, do I have enough money to survive?
Yeah. If I were to be a game developer company right now, studio, how do I go about starting the code development journey? Where do we start? How do we start? How do we go about that?
First thing is identifying your in a couple of weeks. Do you have any specific expertise through your background? Maybe you are very good at composing music, or you are very good at specific engineering task. And you can build from there and showcase your work. Nobody's gonna hire you based on your word alone. You're not gonna come, oh, you have a cool shirt, I like your smile, let's come and build the game with me. You have to show some expertise somewhere. And the easier it is for your client to understand your specific expertise and what you bring that other people don't bring, it can also be your background. I know people who have services in, for example, helping companies or studios localize their game to it's not just as a translation but like what we call geolocalization, about adapting content to the sensibilities of a people. So bringing them, looking at seeing if there's any racial bias in the way the script was written, for example, if there's any type of partnership specific to some type of music, or maybe they created a game in the universe that's African and they want somebody from there that would bring them to daily life. It can be anything, but you need to pinpoint what is their strength and build from there.
So, but
But we what?
but do we have to? Where I'm actually going is because I'm trying to figure out how do we. Is there a platform or a way that we can approach these clients? Like, how do we get to meet them?
How do we get to meet them? Even we don't have a secret. That's kind of my job. I just show up at places where I think they will be. And I send them emails and I look them through LinkedIn. I have personal connections, and usually that's how you build that connection. There's no secret. There's no platform magical and you send your portfolio and people are going to come to you. You have to, it's like finding partners anywhere else.
All right, thank you so much, Soukayna. Please can we stand together for Soukayna? That was such an amazing session. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So many questions.